Hi, friends. This is John. Welcome back to the Regenerative Agriculture Podcast, where we have all kinds of fun conversations related to regenerating our soil, regenerating ecosystem health, plant health, animal health, and ultimately our own health. And of course, as a part of that, it's important for us to regenerate our relationships and to regenerate our capacity for stewardship so that we can be closely connected and reward farmers well for doing a good job. I've been looking forward to the conversation we're having today for some time. I'm very pleased to have here with me Corwin Heatwole from Farmer Focus. Corwin has been doing an amazing job. One of the pieces that is so desperately needed in our space is facilitating market access. And Corwin has quite a remarkable story in that domain. So, Corwin, please tell us a little bit about your journey, the whole story arc of scope of the work that you're doing today and what brought you here.
Thank you, John. First, it's a pleasure to be with you today. And I'll take you back to how I grew up on the farm and just valuing the farming lifestyle. I'm a sixth generational farmer here in the Shenandoah Valley. And growing up on the farm, just got immersed in the farmer's lifestyle and working hard on the farm, taught work ethic at a young age, get your hands dirty, barefoot in the barns and around, manure squishing up between your toes. Not sure how many brain cells that affected, but hopefully not too many.
Oh, I would expect that it affected them, but probably positively. We have a large part of our neural network associated with our gut, and that's associated with our microbiome. So yes, our microbiome affects our ability to think.
Well, I'm not surprised by that, and I'm sure that I'm not surprised that you have knowledge on that, John. But growing up on a farm, they say you can take the boy out of the off the farm, but you can't take the farmer out of the boy. And after going on several business adventures, I had purchased my first farm at 23 years old, and after several years of running a farm, growing for an integrated company, and seeing some of the challenges firsthand for myself that I didn't have access to when I was, just growing up on the farm doing the work and not understanding all the financial challenges and all the inside workings, really started to try to wrap my mind around the system and where we could potentially make it better. But there was that big hurdle of, well, how am I going to do this? Where am I going to find the time? Where am I going to find the money? So it was where one of the other companies I had started, it was an insulation company, had reached a horizon where we had hired someone to take over my head position, and it freed up a little time. And where I was at with enough financial wherewithal, I set my mind and heart to essentially starting a company that I could grow for as a poultry producer, because the farm that we had, the kids loved the farm. We didn't live on the farm, and that was one of the things I wanted to work toward. But you ever ask the kids, where do you want to go? Well, they always wanted to go to the farm. We had a spring-fed pond behind the poultry barns up against the foot of the mountain, and we had docks, diving boards, sliding boards, little beach area. You could fish and uh, cook food over the fire, and it was a highlight. So we'd work hard, play hard, and it was my favorite place too, absolutely. And I've always loved the animals and loved just the amount of gratification there is in a job well done with growing animals that you're really proud of. But when it doesn't make sense financially, and the question kept haunting me, can I pass this farm to the next generation and expect them to carry this burden? And I knew the answer. Deep down, I knew the answer. I couldn't. I could. So I was faced with tough decisions. Do I invest in this farm, trying to give it a future for my children, hand them the burden, or do I wind this farm down, run it hard, wear the equipment out and sell it to the next poor soul that blindly comes into this investment and is going to have a lot of struggle? So it was through that lens that we need to start a company that can partner with growers in ways that allow growers to be financially viable and sustainable for the next generation. And that's why our mission statement for the company is to promote and protect generational family farms. So I can give you details of where some of our struggles came about, how the grower model of how we partner with growers actually came about in detail. But that's just a little bit of the backstory.
I love that model. I love the motto that is framed around serving and protecting family farms because some time ago I released a podcast episode where I described the work that we are embracing with our regenerative verification integrity grown, which is a space that I got into somewhat reluctantly, but I fundamentally believe if we want to have a conversation about regeneration at scale, the fundamental thing that needs regenerated, without which nothing else is meaningful, is regenerating our capacity for stewardship. In other words, we have to have more people. We need more people on the landscape who have loving, caring relationships for the ecosystem and the landscape that they're managing. And to do that, you need to compensate them well. You need to pay them well. I was on a panel once talking about regenerative agriculture to a financial audience, a group of investors who wanted to invest in regenerative farmland. And I made the comment to the room that if farmers put a similar amount of effort and energy and dedication and focus into any other significant trade or craft, or an equivalent amount into the financial space, they would, as the people who were in the audience, they would be paid 3 to 5 times as much as they are paid as a farmer, perhaps more. And that brought kind of a collective gasp and a realization of reality to the room. So I greatly appreciate and respect the work that you're doing and the way that you're framing that. So why don't you tell us a bit about where your operation is right at this moment? What's the scope of your work and what does it all look like?
Currently, we have two processing facilities located in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So we're right in the middle of the East Coast. And
Corwin, I'm actually realizing that we're missing some context. You have two processing facilities, but processing what and doing what? We haven't talked about that yet.
yeah, I was going to get to that in a bit, but let's circle back. So you go back to pre-startup and we say, so how are we going to start a chicken company that can be financially viable in a world where most processing plants produce 3 to 10 million pounds a week, and margins are sometimes between 1 and 5 cents a pound. And it was through collaborative conversations with local farmers that the idea to be organic surfaced. So I went rushing back to my old slow desktop at home, fired it up that evening, and before the sun went down, I had no doubt what I was going to do. After reading the organic standards, the natural light, the dark time at night, the relaxed density, everything that the standards required is what we knew would grow a great chicken. It's an environment that wouldn't hinder and add cost. It would actually be an environment that would allow chickens to thrive. Of course, outside of the additional cost of organic feed, it wouldn't be a burden. So I become very excited about it at that moment. And so that's when we set forward to start an organic chicken company. And before the close of that week, I had found a farm to certify organic and I'd ordered 300 chickens. Very first chickens I'd owned in my life. I had grown millions of chickens for the integrated companies, but this was the first chickens I ever owned. It was 300.
What I like about that story is you have this interesting juxtaposition of starting small but moving fast.
Sometimes too fast. So chickens, and that was spring of 2012. So we are an organic chicken producer. So to give you an idea, back up to how the insulation company got started. So I was doing some random construction and I was building my own house. And as the insulation contractor pulled away, I stood on the front porch and said, if they can treat people like that with that kind of service and charge that much, they need competition. And never had a thought before to start an insulation company. Within 6 weeks, had a warehouse, trucks, licensed, insured, and we're doing a first insulation job. So you're talking about move quick. So to jump forward in the story, though, back to to organic chickens, we were going to have a local processor process those birds. And when those birds were about 3 weeks old, those first 300 chickens, they called and said, we're no longer going to be able to process your birds. I'm like, I freaked out a little bit, like, what? You're not going to process my birds? In 3, 4 weeks, someone's going to have to slaughter these birds. And I knew no one else was going to be available to slaughter those birds. And at the time, some of our biggest challenges become some of the most pivotal moments for us in our business. And that was one, because we scrambled and looked far and wide. And we did find someone to process those birds a lot farther out of the area, but it showed us that if we wanted a viable business model that wouldn't be susceptible to, could we find someone to process our birds, and how long would they work with us? We knew at that moment we had no choice but to create our own processing capabilities. And that was incredibly pivotal. And so, anyway, that made us look for our own building and set up our own equipment. And the Lord saw fit to open doors at a large, previously abandoned processing facility downtown Harrisonburg that was being used as a warehouse. And the owner of it was delighted to do a lease purchase to us at a very attractive rate, because it was adding value to him, and it was just a perfect fit to give us a lot of square footage at very low cost and help us get started.
So you started out with the vision of being a chicken farmer, a chicken producer, and then shifted into processing. And what's the scope of your processing today? How many years ago did this happen?
So put the first 300 birds on the ground in 2012. And at that time, paying someone to process them, that went really good. And we got up to 2,000 birds a week. And what was important about that is I had made the breakthrough. I had went from growing for an integrator to owning the birds in my barns, complete operational control, making about 5 times the amount per bird that I was previously. Yeah, we were catching chickens and hauling them at night, and we were working hard, but we were loving every second of it.
Well, you were making money.
We were making money. And back to your previous statement about when farmers aren't making money, what they can't invest in. We always say, if farmers aren't in the black, they can't operate green. And as a general whole, as you know, farmers are very passionate about what they do.
Yeah,
Rarely do they enter farming because they're pursuing a lucrative career. They're deeply passionate about what they do, and they love the land and the animals, and they have a desire within them to be stewards of it.
exactly.
But they're often hindered by the lack of profitability in their operation to implement these stewardship principles.
Exactly right. You nailed it.
So that pivoted into creating our own processing plant. So when we found that large space and we created those processing capabilities, that was spring of 2014, exactly 2 years from putting those first 300 birds on the ground. But that we was going to be capable of processing more birds than what I could produce just off of my 2 farms. So that's what made the exciting opportunity to partner with other farmers. And that's where the farmer focused model of how we partner with farmers was born over that opportunity. So we went out and sat down at kitchen tables with farmers and said, we have an opportunity to create the dream model. We can brainstorm something into existence. So those kitchen table conversations are what, with other farmers, was what developed what we're still operating with today.
So I want to dig into those relationships that you developed with farmers and how what came out of that. But before we go there, let's dig a bit into the market. You're at the point where you're producing 2,000 birds a week on your own, and you see a pathway for other farmers to join you. What did the marketing look like, and what did it look like to build a brand and to build a pipeline to move that many chickens into the marketplace?
At that time, I was partnered with Ayrshire Farms in Northern Virginia, and they they had a very small processing facility, and they had a need for well-grown organic chickens. And they didn't grow up farmers like myself. So there's one thing I knew how to do really well, and that's grow a chicken. Process a chicken and market a chicken was all new territory for me. So that's where it became a perfect partnership. And that was the majority of my sales in the years where I was just growing live chickens and hauling them primarily to Ayrshire farms. And then when we started the processing facility, that opened up a whole new realm of operating our own processing plant and the sales arm and marketing. And we started off mostly with bulk industrial, like to sausage manufacturers and those people who just buy bulk. We did not start off with a retail brand, but it became very apparent very quick that we was going to need to enter the retail space, being organic and more niche, for us to extract the proper value for what we were doing with certified humane, global animal partnership, certified organic, and all the attributes that we needed a brand that could represent that.
So I've had several business venture experiences where I've been the one step removed from retail. I've never actually taken foods to the retail space, other than if you would count a farmer's market or a roadside stand many years ago when I first started out. But it seems to me that getting into retail brand building is a significant lift and a slippery ice field to navigate. What has that whole process been like for you?
Oh, you're bringing a lot of flashbacks. It has taken many twists and turns, and it has reshaped itself multiple times through our journey of developing a brand. And we changed the brand name 3 different times until we finally landed on what we believed represented us, who we are, and what we're about. When you just take one glance at the Farmer Focus label, it says who we are. And it was one of our customers that we were selling to. God bless her, she had the strength to share this with us. She said, "Your brand is not good. I don't know why you don't just call it Farmer Focus, because that's who you are." It hurt so much because we talked about it, and at first I'm like, that does not have a ring to it, Farmer Focus. But as we thought about it and discussed it internally, it grew. It grew on us until it did become the brand, and then we actually changed the company name to represent the brand, to eliminate additional confusion.
And as you've gone through these various iterations, well, with your most recent iteration of being being branded as Farmer Focus, what has customer response to that been like?
Customer response has been very positive, and what we've realized as well is that the majority of our marketing spend has been a waste. When you design your brand well, it tells your story. Not entirely. You still need to put some effort behind it and build a lot of content and support it. But your brand and the quality and consistency will speak for themselves, and you'll experience a pretty good growth in your brand.
I'm reminded of a story. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, and now the name is escaping me. I want to say the company was called Moonshot. It was recently acquired by Patagonia, like 9 months or so ago, and they were a healthy snack bar. And when listening to the founder's story, one of the pieces that I was really intrigued by was that they iterated their packaging and the information on the packaging. If I recall correctly, it was like 6 times in a year. They just rapidly prototyped, rapidly iterated, and until they finally hit on the that resonated with people and caused them to make buying decisions. And when they got it right, it had an immediate and significant impact on sales. It was not small. And I think it's so easy for us to forget that we are not the audience, that we need to appeal to where our audience is in their mental headspace and what they believe to be true about the world.
Very true. And myself, growing up on a farm, I automatically assumed that people should know everything about how a chicken is grown, how farmers are treated, how this relationship works, what it takes to get food to the table. And then reality hits me. And I realize everything has to be explained and presented in ways that show this.
You know, there's this fascinating juxtaposition. This is a reflection on how people's minds work. I've come to the realization that everyone knows something that I would benefit from knowing if I can just figure out what that is. But then the flip side, in many cases, very frequently I had the experience you can't just go ask people what that is. What is something that you know that other people would benefit from knowing? They'll really struggle to answer that question. And the reason we struggle to answer that question is from this idea that's called the curse of knowledge, that you are so familiar with what you know that you assume everyone else knows what you know, not realizing that most people have no idea of some of the things that you know.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So let's come back to the conversations you were having with other growers around kitchen tables and building alliances and building a larger network to produce more chickens. What did that whole process look like, and how has it evolved?
So the kitchen table discussions were, if you were growing for a company, and how would you desire that relationship to look? And as some people don't know, but the partnership that farmers have with the integrated companies is kind of, trying to think of the right word to describe it.
I don't think it qualifies for the word partnership. It's more like a feudal serf.
Okay, so you described it. The farmers don't appreciate that, John. I didn't want to go there. Um, but the farmers don't own the birds in the barns. They really don't have operational control. They are told what to do and when to do it, how to do it. And I disagreed with that substantially because every farm is different. Every farm needs to be operated differently. Every farmer has a different tolerance for risk and different things. So, and farmers need to be able to live out their convictions on their farm. So that's what really came out in those kitchen table conversations is I want to own the birds in my barns. I want that risk reward. I want the opportunity to be paid fairly for those. I don't want to be paid in a tournament system. I want clear and transparent pay terms. And with ownership came operational control. So that's the model that we built. All of our farmers own 100% of everything that's on their farm. The chicks in the barns, the feed in the tanks, everything is owned by the farmers. And our governing standards are our certifications. And I love it because farmer focus makes zero requirements of the farmer, none whatsoever. We're partnered with Certified Humane, Global Animal Partnership. 100% of our farms are GAP Level 3 and Certified Organic. Now, obviously, we need consistency of breeds, genetics, feed rations, and all of that. And that's what Farmer Focus provides to the farmer. But the practices on the farm, what bedding you use, the depth, the natural light, everything the farmer does is in the control of the farmer. And farmers just love when the company stays out of their business, because if the farmer does exceedingly well, or if a farmer's struggling, obviously we're going to come alongside them and do everything we can to help every farmer be as successful as possible. But it's the performance at the farm can be influenced completely by the farmer's level of commitment.
What happened with the farmer economics once they had complete control and autonomy? I seem to recall, if I understood correctly a little bit ago, you said that your income increased 5x once you had control and once you started producing organic birds. Is that right?
Yes, that's when I was selling the chickens to Ayrshire Farms in Northern Virginia. Obviously, the economics have shifted some as we've scaled from 300 chickens to 300,000, then to 600,000. The economics shift a little bit. But for the partnerships with the farmers have seen their net income increase on average 35, 40, 45%, which is substantial, when, your payments and your operating costs essentially stay flat and your income increases. That's a big lift. That creates a lot of additional cushion.
Well, it creates the opportunity to make investments in regeneration and it creates the opportunity to be better stewards. So, what is the scale that you're operating at right now?
We're currently producing a little over 600,000 chickens a week, and about 450,000 of those are organic. The rest are no antibiotics ever, outside access, non-GMO products, and we're working to develop a retail line around that too. So we're now entering into some diversification as we've seen as markets shift. This is one thing we've learned, and we learned it the hard way as markets evolve, right? And economic pressures ebb and flow. The organic market can be really strong and see double digit growth. And then, like over the last 2 years, we've seen it actually stall for a little bit and there become a lot of pressure. So, what we have decided as a company to have two product lines allows us to ebb and flow so that we can more consistently keep the barns full and focus on consistent farm revenue.
When you're at the scale of 600,000 birds a week, how many farmers are a part of that grower network and are contributing to that pipeline?
About 130 farm partnerships.
That is awesome.
It's very exciting. You know, Thinking back on all of this and to where I am at now, with as this has evolved, I was on my farm, running some other small business. For 10 years, I was CEO of the company, and now I'm chairman of the board, head of regenerative ag, farm innovation, and grower relations. And now I'm spending more time back on the farm. So I started the company to create the model, create this financially viable farming. So not only am I living the dream on my own farm with my own children, helping run it and everything, I'm spending more time back on the farm now. 10 years later, after all of this, 130 other farms get to tag along on this journey with us. It is quite a privilege.
That's quite an achievement. That's quite an accomplishment, Corwin. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
But the piece that comes to mind for me, it is not just those farmers, but when you think about the grain pipeline, you're also supporting many other organic grain farmers as well. Do you have any idea of what the scope of overall land impact looks like?
Yeah, it takes about 225,000 acres of production to produce the grain that our chickens consume.
That's a significant impact. There's always more needed, of course.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges for us is domestic supply. And I'm sure we'll get to it here in this podcast, but
Let's talk about it right now.
it's part of what we're working on for the future as the interest in organic meat consumption has really skyrocketed here in this country. The amount of farmers willing to take the big risk of organic transition has lagged far behind the meat consumption, making an undersupply of organic grains. And it's forced a lot of us to purchase the majority of our grains internationally, which is deeply concerning to, for many different reasons. And that is what we're going to be working on here.
How much of your current grain supply line comes from domestically? What percentage are you forced to source internationally?
It's 20 to 25% domestic, 75 to 80% international. And that's where, as we look into the future, we get excited about investing time to go further up the supply chain to where the fields that the grain is grown in, even to where the seed is produced and the genetics of the seed that needs to come into this pipeline and network of farmers. So instead of working with companies to secure the grain that we need, and it comes from international and all over, and we're starting to work on it, and it will grow legs, and it's starting to, the legs used to be pretty short, but now they're starting to move and wiggle a little bit. And that's to start to build relationships directly with each crop producer, whether you have 20 acres or 5,000 acres. I've met with them all. I'm meeting with a a farmer that has 7,000 acres, organic acres, and farmers that want to transition to organic. And we're working on building direct relationships with these farmers to where, their success is our success. And it's a true partnership. And that's where we all want to work together to make sure that they are getting the right seed at the right genetics at the right price, and they have access to the right fertilizer, and that we can bring additional diversity into their rotations to help their own success. Because as their yields go up and they have less volatility in their operations, then we all win together. So it's a big picture look than just saying, "Hey, farmer, can I buy corn and beans from you?" It's a holistic approach to how the partnership works.
So when you use the term entering into a partnership with the farmer, you also use the word partner between the big aggregators and farmers. So I'm going to push here a little bit to understand exactly what you mean when you use the word term partner in this context. To what extent are you partnering with growers on offtake agreements and really solidifying their market access as well?
Yeah. So I will back up. And thanks for the point. I should not have used the word partnership earlier. I should have just used the word arrangement. And but a partnership would look more, let's say that you are preparing to transition your farm to organic, and you're concerned about the economic viability of your farm during transition. You're concerned about the best practices that you should be implementing to not just weather the transition to organic, but the practices once you're organic. Or, is weeds going to take over your farm? What kind of yield can I expect? And another big concern of farmers is, who's going to buy my grain and how much am I going to get paid? Because where the grain market is today, is typically far from where it will be 3 years from now on the other side of transition. Typically, as you look back at historical swings, highly unpredictable. And so a partnership looks at all three. Partnership looks at, how can we invest in the farmer and help them soften the financial impact of transition? And what all resources can we bring for best practices and just walking with the farmer through the transition, lots of education, and then long-term offtake agreements on the backside, where, obviously the longer the better for us, but we want farmers to have flexibility and options. So it really comes down to each individual situation as to how long a farmer wants security on who's going to purchase their grain, and what percentage of the grain that we should be purchasing to eliminate our risk and theirs alike.
Yeah, when you think about developing these partnerships with the grain producers, according to my back of the envelope math, you need somewhere between 160 and 170,000 acres that you could utilize domestically. What does the optimal geographic footprint for that look like? If you could pick and choose where your grain was coming from, what would the geographic footprint be that you would desire to source from?
Well, where we desire to source from and what helps us mitigate risks can be different, right? For the cost of logistics and the carbon footprint of logistics, in our backyard is better. And there is a lot of acreage in Virginia that is excited about transitioning to organic. And actually, we could produce the majority of our grains right here in Virginia, or I will say within a 3-hour radius of where I'm sitting. But that would add too much volatility to, if a drought hit this area, we could be very undersupplied for a year and be very a lot of risk to an open market, because we would have to turn and pivot and purchase grains without contractual relationships in place. And so through that lens, we look at spreading out farther from Pennsylvania to North Carolina and a little bit farther west. In fact, this summer, I have a number of road trips scheduled to visit a number of farms that are either interested in transitioning to organic or already organic, and then discussing how we can most effectively utilize some rail opportunities to rail in the organic grain and rail out products like pelletized poultry litter and things that they can't get.
So when you say several trips west, or how far west is reasonable? You're looking in the I states, the Midwest, Corn Belt region, further west than that?
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking in that region, and something I haven't drilled down on yet is what percentage of our supply is the right volume to mitigate risks, to delegate into different regional pockets to operate in.
Well, for all of our listeners, I have a request for you and a goal, and that is I want you to fill up Corwin's inbox and phone voicemail and get him more supply than he needs. I'm pretty sure that's going to be possible.
I think it is possible, and thank you, John. I love meeting farmers and going and visiting with farmers and working on this. And the more I visit with farmers, the more I realize that what sounds large at 225,000 acres is going to be oversubscribed very quickly. And that is really exciting.
That is exciting, but it also then asks the question of how do you see? You mentioned that the last 2 years, demand for chickens has stabilized and slowed down a little bit from the previous rapid growth. And none of us have a crystal ball, but do you have any perspectives or insights into how you see your overall size and scope evolving over the course of the next half a dozen years or so?
Yes. Well, when I say the market has softened, the market softened, but our sales has not softened. And we have been blessed to now have achieved the largest organic chicken brand on the East Coast. And we've been fastest growing for 5 years running now. And the brand is maintaining momentum at a rate that we can't keep up with. The chicken market actually declined by six, the organic chicken market declined by 6% in 2022 and 23, but our sales increased by almost 15%. And that's by store. That's not, we've kept adding new customers and adding stores, and our products are in about 6,500 stores now. So that's taking out store growth, just looking at each store in particular experienced brand growth. So as the market softened, it said our brand is resonating with consumers. It hits their sensitive buttons on what they care about. They care that farmers are and animals and the environment are being all looked at, not just how, the price of the chicken. They care about the quality of the chicken and the attributes. And with some of the recent developments of customers that want to expand with us, until we create additional processing capabilities, we are kind of capped. And because our current facility can process about 635 to 650,000 birds a week, and we're pretty much there. And so what the next, 5 to 10 years will look like will be facility expansion. We don't know whether that'll be here in the Shenandoah Valley or whether that'll be, East Coast, Midwest, West Coast. We're kind of doing what is prudent right now because we just went through a phase of fast growth, and fast growth is painful. Everything that you thought you had working quits working and breaks. All of the systems at the plant and everywhere are challenged when you grow as fast as we have this last year. And so we really just want to spend a year or two getting our feet under us and operating without too much growth. That's is going to be really exciting for us, actually, not to induce that level of pain on ourselves, and then assess what we should be, where next steps will be. But, a company that is not growing is shrinking, and we absolutely are excited about creating new opportunities and new areas to partner with more farmers. And, that lends to the benefit of spreading out with our partnerships with these organic grain producers. One day, we very likely will have processing capabilities in the Midwest or the West Coast and these different pockets of grain producers across the entire country. One day will lend a lot of benefit to each location.
There were a number of things that you just said that I would love to comment on, but one of the things that kind of gave me pause, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm asking the question of why, or how exactly does this come about? And that is, you describe the organic chicken market has softened, but your particular brand has grown, and in the last couple of years. And given the current macroeconomic climate that we are in, and the rapidly increasing consumer price index, and the limited resources that many people have for groceries, that's a significant statement. So it's an interesting reflection of, okay, the organic market has softened. Why? Well, perhaps it's because of macroeconomic factors and individual economics. But your brand has not softened, it has been growing. And that's a remarkable, again, my domain of expertise is not in understanding retail dynamics, but it seems to me that's quite a remarkable accomplishment.
It is an absolute honor. Appreciate you recognizing that. And I will add that, through 2019 and 20, those were some glory years with some strong profit margins. And we wanted to test out our marketing skills on this new brand. And so, those years we had marketing budgets that ranged from 10 to $15 million. And we really fueled marketing. But when organic grain prices started to skyrocket in late 2021 and through 2022, going from $550, $580 a ton, even hitting $1,003 a ton at one point, margins didn't just compress; they went away, and then there's negative cash flow. So we took the marketing budget and just slashed it to nothing. So you know that was a good experience, but we can't afford to do that anymore. And sales did not drop; they just kept steadily climbing. Like, was we wasting
Wow.
this whole time? And so that's where we're still at. So to note and compound on what you said, the growth was experienced not just in a down market, but in the absence of a marketing budget. The only thing we do
Wow.
now is support social media. There is pretty much zero advertising for the last 2.5 years.
Wow. That's an incredible story.
That's what market dynamics will force you to learn sometimes.
So, when you reflect back on what the journey over the last decade has looked like and where you are at the moment, what are some of the things that you find the most rewarding? What experiences have been the most rewarding?
Hands down, it's the farmer stories. When you say what is most rewarding, it's those 130 farm partnerships. It's the stories like about 2 years after getting started and taking on our initial group of farm partnerships, a farmer and his wife came into the office, closed the door with tears running down their face. They told me, 2 years ago when we joined up with you all, we could barely even put food on the table. There wasn't a credit card that wasn't maxed out. Fuel company had cut us off. And 2 years later, we're not just current on all credit cards, all fuel bills. We're talking to the bank about purchasing our second farm. And they just weep, like literally like break down. And during all the hard times and all the things that we face, those stories that the farmers share with us when we go around and visit farms or they come into the office, it's what makes it all worth it. And then through 2018, 19, and 20, we saw a different theme of success stories emerge. And that was the next generation coming back to farming, not just to farming, but back to farming. And there was a number of cases where a son or daughter had left the family farm with no plans on coming back to the farm ever, and had pursued careers in other areas a lot more lucrative than the family farm had been. And once producing for Farmer Focus for anywhere from 2 to 5 years, and seeing the economics and how much more fun it is to farm when it's sustainable and viable, they returned to the farm. And one quick story, Jason Daughtery, one of our farmers, he had left the farm and pursued a career in law enforcement. His dad was getting up in years and having some health challenges, and the decision was going to have to be made soon about potentially selling the family farm. And he called his dad one day from the patrol car and said, "Dad, I'm coming home." And Jason said it was just silence. He's like, "Well, Dad, aren't you going to say anything?" And his dad couldn't talk because he was speechless. The tears were hitting the kitchen floor. And his dream of that farm staying in the family for generations, the farm that he poured his life into, blood, sweat, and tears, everything he worked for was now worth it. It was going to be sustained to the next generation. And it's those stories that, when times are hard and we're battling our internal challenges and different things that come with a fast growing company, all you have to do is think back of all these farmers that are depending on us and the difference that we're making, not just in the direct relationships with farmers, but when we started up and we went out and put the word out, we're taking farms. We built a massive waiting list of farmers, and other companies were forced to give raises and retract letters that they were forcing farmers to make upgrades to their farm. And, when you just think about the direct impact and the indirect impact, all the stress that we've induced on ourselves is completely worth it.
That's an incredible story. There are two thoughts that come to mind. In business, there is this pithy saying that sales solves all problems. And of course, the foundational truth behind that is when you have profitable sales, of course, when you have profitable sales, that gives you the resources to solve all problems. And this is what has been absent from much of the countryside, from much of the rural landscape, is farmers and therefore their communities collectively haven't had the resources to be the problem solvers, to be effective stewards. And that's one of the things that I so greatly appreciate about the work that you're doing, is that you're bringing those economic resources back into the community and back into rural landscapes. And the indirect influences, when you think about the indirect influences, we see something similar with our work at AEA. And from the very early days, I've told our team at AEA that our role, our job, our reason for being is not to be all things to all people. We can't expect to do that. We can't expect to be the universal supplier of all inputs. But what we can do is that we can be a leader and provide such a high standard of excellence that other people are forced to change the way they show up to be effective competition. And that's exactly what you were able to facilitate as well, is to be, in one sense, to be a pace setter, but you're not a pace setter running alongside of, you're a pace setter forcing other people to try to catch up. And that's a remarkable space to be in. So thank you for all that you've brought to that space.
Yeah, it's a privilege. I will share, when we started up, we were nobody, and there was a lot of critics. We had this unique model. So the critics would say, "Well, you'll be bankrupt with a model that crazy. You'll be bankrupt in 2 years, no question." Well, once we made it to 2 years, then it changed. Well, okay, you've survived, but that'll never work at scale. And now that it has worked very well at scale, now they're saying, "Well, how are you making this work?" And so other integrators have come in and sat down. We're an open book. There's no secret sauce here. We want to help them develop, shift their systems. We understand that they maybe can't change a massive system overnight to be just like ours, but we can help educate them on ways that you can partner with farmers while eliminating a tournament pay system or allowing farmers more ownership and operational control or different. And then even catching the interest of the White House. Secretary Vilsack has visited, and I've had the privilege to have a couple meetings with him where he really dug into this model and how it works, and really appreciate his public statement where he said, "Farmer Focus has figured out the secret sauce for partnering with farmers." I did not pay him anything to say that, but I did appreciate it.
Well, there are a number of enterprises in different spaces that are doing work similar to what you're doing that I'm so appreciative of, and it is really a reflection of the space that you come from within. When you authentically desire to create true partnerships and a relationship that is an authentic win for everyone at the table, everyone on the table is intent on that outcome, then it is achievable. It's realistic, and that has not been the case for the relationships that farmers have experienced on the offtake side for far too many farmers for far too long, where it has been a very extractive relationship to seek to gain as much at the grower's expense as possible.
Yeah, that has to go away. And circling back to the partnership, one thing that I am going to be doing during this road trips this summer is revisiting some unique conversation that I've had with different groups of farmers about a different kind of partnership, a partnership that can take a percentage of production. Let's say a farmer has 1,000 acres. Maybe they want 10% of their acres or 90% of their acres in a relationship where it is more dependent on what a farmer needs to be financially viable than it is where the global market is at. And, whether it rained in Brazil that year, influences the price of your grain. And it's more focused on profitability per acre. And it's a linked armed approach in the way that as we as a company can help partner with seed companies to bring supply and bulk purchase and reduce cost, then we are adding profitability to that farmer and we share in that profitability. So providing our outputs from the farm and the processing plant that we can turn into valuable fertilizer and make available at really low cost to the farmers. That lowers operational costs. That boosts the profit per acre. We share in that. That is something that I'm really excited about. And that's why I took this role shift with the company as CEO. I was way too involved in the day to day and I wasn't getting the time to go out and work on the vision of building a true partnership with hundreds and hundreds of farmers that everybody wins. Every stakeholder in the process must win, or it's not a sustainable model. The planet has to win. I've been working on my farming, having lots of fun, trialing all of these different regenerative practices and doing what people say shouldn't be done. Because I always say if I'm not failing at something, I'm not trying hard enough. Well, I can promise you, we're trying hard enough to fail, but we're learning so much about these practices and how they add resiliency and water holding potential, drought resistance, yield boosting, lower input costs, all of those things, and focused on the regenerative practices that we should adopt at scale. So as we can help coach farmers on the regenerative practices they can adopt at scale, the farmer becomes more valuable. There is this carbon sequestration element to the crop production, and then input costs drop, nutrient density of grain increases as the soil health and the soil biology is fueled. It's just a full circle. So that is the lens of which I'm trying to build out this relationship. I've got about 80% of it boiled down in my brain, and I need some just collaborative conversations with some big picture thinkers to help me finalize it. And we will be ready to start partnering with farmers with that kind of approach.
Well, I would be delighted to collaborate with you in that way, and I'm sure there are many other listeners on the podcast who would as well, who will be reaching out to you. So thank you all for doing that. Corwin, you have such an incredible story. I'm thinking about how to progress our conversation from this point. You have an incredibly rich entrepreneurial story. There is, of course, the farming story, all the pieces that you're done, and the supply chain dynamics. But I think I'm going to just turn it over to you and ask the question: what is an important topic that you'd love to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, you talked about my most important topic. That's how we work further up the supply chain, partnering with farmers and build that out. I'd have to ponder that just a little bit. There's other elements that play into this concept, right? There is technology advancements. A lot of individual farmers, including myself as a farmer, can't afford to trial technology, invest in that technology, and take the risk that it might not work. But us as a company need to be partnering with farmers to trial lots of technology, then to help make that technology known and available to other farmers. And that's going to be a piece of what we will be working on. So I think that's a something critical to mention to your listeners, that especially those with companies that have technologies that is advancing the regenerative space, that we want to know about it, and we want to be seeing how we can trial at small scale at first, and then what a adoption looks like.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question that I sometimes ask. I'm not sure if you're the right personality fit for it, but I'll ask it anyway. What is a topic that you would like to speak about more often, but you find yourself hesitating because you're not sure people are ready to hear it quite yet?
Uh, well, I don't feel qualified to speak much on this topic, but the last 3 to 5 years, my extra time, which isn't much, but I have invested a fair amount of time in studying soil health and how soil health correlates into human health, and how soil health impacts the nutrient density of the food that we eat, and how that what we eat impacts human health. And that this whole journey that I'm on, and this vision that not just myself, but many other people are on, to regenerate the soil, thus has such a far reaching effect, so far beyond. So you can think about all the right reasons why you would focus on regenerative farming for your operation as a farmer. I'm going to reduce input costs. I'm going to lower my drought susceptibility. The soil's going to hold a lot more water. When I use the roller crimper method, for example, I'm mulching all this ground. I'm holding moisture in. I'm keeping the ground cooler. I'm fueling the biology. I'm boosting yield at a lot lower cost. I'm eliminating risk. Human health was not mentioned once in that. So while you are at each point implementing things for the right reasons at the different stages of the process, even all the way through to the grain that this chicken consumes has a higher nutrient density. It's going to grow better. It's going to need less grain to grow the same pounds of chicken. So the company benefits, everyone benefits. Then there is this unquantifiable benefit to the consumer that eats that chicken. And I'm not qualified to talk about it, but I am passionate about it. And I would love to, in time, work with labs and specialists and smart people to work to quantify the human health impact.
Well, I would be delighted to connect you with people who have already done that with other animal products. There are a few people who would be very worthwhile talking with. Particular those that come to mind would be Stefan Van Vliet at Utah State University, but also the French organization of Bleu Blanc Cour. I interviewed Pierre Vale early on in this podcast, and they have over 40 papers that are peer-reviewed and published in the literature where they documented the human health impacts of beef, pork, poultry, eggs, and milk, where they had a defined quality parameter. They were focusing specifically on omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acid ratios. And they had defined parameters for quality of these various animal products. And then they studied the human health impacts. And all of this is in the published literature. It's largely in French, but it is available, can be translated. And they have made a tremendous impact. When I interviewed Pierre, must be close to 3 years ago at this point, maybe 2 years ago. If I recall correctly, at that point, the animal products that were being distributed with their certification approval for reaching these quality standards and these measured quality standards was 18% of the total supply chain. No, excuse me. It was 60% of the total supply chain in France and was already in 18 countries in Europe at that point. So, significant impact, but a story that's largely unknown here in North America.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating topic. Wonderful. Well, Corwin, I want to say thank you for being here, for sharing your wisdom, for your experience, and for all the work and the energy that you've brought to this space. What is the best way for people to connect with you and to reach you? And we can put any links in the podcast show notes that people can find and access.
Yeah, well, I'm an open book, so I'm going to share my email
Oh,
address
no, no.
as well.
Well,
But farmerfocus.com is the company platform, and you can meet 100% of our farmers on the website. There's a web page for each farmer that tells each farmer story. And that's one thing that's been unique to the brand that I should have mentioned earlier is farm to table traceability, because the farmers are the star of the show. We're not. So we thought it very crucial that all consumers get to meet every single farmer, not one farm that you polish up for pictures and post it on your website. 100% of our farms are posted on the website, and each package of chicken has a 4-letter farm ID code on it that you can take to the website, punch in, you can meet the farmers. And so that's unique to us. And you can also find a store locator on the website, so you can find where our products are available near you. Then there's a contact us. And in that, I receive those too. And ones that need to reach me are sent to me through that. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. If you have something that spiked your interest during this podcast.
thank you, Corwin. Thanks for being here and for all that you bring to the world. The team at AEA and I are dedicated to bringing this show to you because we believe that knowledge and information is the foundation of successful regenerative systems. At AEA, we believe that growing better quality food and making more money from your crops is possible. And since 2006, we've worked with leading professional growers to help them do just that. At AEA, we don't guess, we test, we analyze, and we provide recommendations based on scientific data, knowledge, and experience. We've developed products that are uniquely positioned to help growers make more money with regenerative agriculture. If you are a professional grower who believes in testing instead of guessing, someone who believes in a better, more regenerative way to grow, visit advancingecoag.com and contact us to see if AEA is right for you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to working with you.